Hello, I'm Paul Harvey-Brooks. I've been passionate about plants, gardens and landscapes since I can remember as a small child. That is a very magical space. Welcome to Northern Ireland, the most dramatic landscape of craggy cliffs, giants, and also some of the most important gardens in the country. Well, this extraordinary landscape that we're looking at is a freak of nature, if you like, and it really happened a very, very long time ago. There's a volcanic fissure that runs through here, and the sheer pressure of that forced up all of the lava, and the quick cooling of lava forms basalt, which is what the Giant's Causeway is made out of. And it's made these really unique shapes. And when you look across the landscape, you can see little kind of cuts through it for the different forces of pressure and the cooling. Sometimes they're very, very long, sometimes they're very short, but in each way, it really is like a giant landscape which is completely alien to us. Now, I've already touched on it a little bit. The Giant's Causeway is a unique phenomenon created by nature. But what's interesting to me is you can look at the rock and you can really read that story. Now, imagine when we dig into soil, you can see the profile levels of the different kinds of soil that you've got. And this is saying exactly the same thing, because you can see these huge columns of basalt that have been forced out of the earth are actually in section. So that's like the lava's been pumped, it's dried, it's pumped again, and it keeps coming up and up. And for me, that reveals the kind of natural process that's incredibly beautiful to look at. One of the amazing things about this landscape is you've got both the sea and the kind of sea colonies of the plants which really love that water, and then you've got plants which can really survive with salt spray in a very harsh environment. So all through here, little rivulets, if you like, of soil and kind of granulated bits of stone and basalt have collected to allow plant colonies to really survive through. And you can see there's sea thrift all the way up here, mixed in with different endemic grasses, and right down in the cracks there's even little toad flags. It really is like a little micro world of like alpine beauty. So this is something really special. Now, we often think of our maritime landscape as quite static. So it has winter and then it has summer with things like the thrift on the side of the causeway here. But in spring, you may be lucky enough to find something like this. Now, this is the native scilla to Ireland. It's incredibly rare and it's very, very beautiful. It has a lot of pollinating potential and it clings to the cliffside just in spring. And next to it is another plant which isn't so rare, so I'm quite at liberty to pick that because it's in no way endangered. That is an ancient medicinal herb used by people in Ireland, on the entire island, and all through the United Kingdom. And basically, there's two things this can do. If you peel away the kind of ribs, it's edible and it's very good for the digestive system if you had a stomach complaint. But also, if you had a cut, you could crush that up as a poultice, press it on the cut, and it should help coagulate the blood. And that's really ancient medicine. Oh, hello, Leslie.
Hi, Paul. How are
you?
you? Good to see you today.
This is an amazing landscape, isn't it, really? I mean, I've been exploring, looking at the plants and the kind of science, all the things I know, but I just get the sensation that it must have the most incredible kind of legends attached to it.
Absolutely, Paul. So this is one of our favourite legends in the north of Ireland. So we like to tell you about Finn McCool.
Okay.
And you can see from around here evidence of giants. So even the very stones look as if they were thrown by giants. We've got giants' chimneys of where Finn McCool used to live.
That's that up there?
That's the stack, the chimney stack of Finn McCool's house. Finn McCool was a very proud warrior. He lived in this area. And he had heard that there was a rival giant who lived just across the way in Scotland. So Finn being Finn, he wanted to be the strongest, the mightiest giant in the land. So he had a plan. He built a stone causeway, as you can see here, all the way across to Scotland. Went to Scotland, couldn't see any sign of Benandunner, his rival. So he issued a challenge for him to come to Ireland. So took a few days, but after a while he heard this thump, 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 as you can imagine, coming across these stones from Scotland. Big giant in his kilt. Finn was out working in the fields. Bit of a shock when he looked up and he saw in the distance this mighty giant, much bigger than Finn McCool himself. Finn thought, what have I done?
Yeah.
So he did what any wise Irishman does, and he went back home and asked his wife for advice. And she was the brains behind the outfit. He was purely the muscle.
That's quite often the case, though.
Quite often the case, as you'll know. And she said, Finn, don't worry, I have an idea. She said, Finn, get into the bathtub. I will cover you with blankets. I'll put my best Sunday bonnet on you, and we will pretend that you are our baby. So sure enough, Finn did as he was told. Una then tidied up the house a bit, put on a cup of tea, knock, 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 thunderous knock. Nearly knocked the door down, and there stood Benandunner, the Scottish giant. So Una, she wasn't afraid at all, and she invited him in. Come in, sit down and have a cup of tea. So he was shocked because not many people invite a giant to tea. Yeah. But in he came, sat down, enjoyed his cup of tea, even asked for a slice of cake with it. But as he sat, started to relax, he heard this murmuring in the corner. But what's that? And he looked around, and there he saw the biggest, ugliest, hairiest baby that he had ever seen. What's this? Una said, that's our son. That is our baby. Well, he said, what age is he? It's only about a month old, said Una. You must be very proud, he said, but hang on a minute. I mean, he's huge. She said, yes, I have to shave him twice a day. Did you see the lovely mouthful of teeth?
Not a very pretty baby.
Not very pretty. So Benandunner, it took him a while, but he thought things through slowly. And he thought to himself, if that's the size of the baby, what size must the father be? He must be enormous. So he got out of his seat, tossed his tea to one side, and made his way as fast as he could back across these rocks and back to Scotland, never returned again.
Come back.
And he destroyed the causeway. But we know the story to be true. If you go over to Staffa in Scotland, you will find the same similar stones.
Okay, so there's a little, you left a little bit there.
Left just a little bit there, yeah. But this is what we have today then.
Okay, that is quite an impressive story.
Quite a story, isn't it?
Yeah. And one of the other plants you'll find here on the causeway is this campion. It's in the same family as the one that you'll see all over the British Isles in the countryside, but it's perfectly adapted to living here with the salt spray. It's much more compact. You'll see the foliage is slightly more glaucous, it's thicker so it can deal with the salt spray, but it's the flowers which are most adapted to this environment. So you have the petals there in front of you, quite easy to pollinate, so a wide range of insects can do that. But behind, this bract, which looks like it's still part of the flower, actually protects the seed once it's developing. So if I find you one, you'll see that the petals disappear, and then you're left with this bract, which gets harder as the seed inside ripens, and once it's completely finished, you're left with a hard seed, which generally gets dispersed by wind or small animals that brush past the plant and scatter them into the crevices of the surrounding rocks, and on it colonizes. Hello Hello, Robert.
Oh, hello.
This is such a fantastic garden. I mean, an amazing collection of plants already and a fantastic layout. What's the history of this place? Because I think many people know Mount Stewart for its kind of political history and the people that live there, but I think the garden would come as a real surprise.
Certainly, so the main influence in the garden itself is Lady Edith Londonderry herself. She designed the majority of the gardens from different aspects of her life. She was very big into her mythological sort of fantasy elements, from the Dodo Terrace, which has loads of statues of members of her fantasy art club, to even just to the colour schemes in the garden. So the colour scheme for the Italian garden in general, from one half of the garden is sunset to sunrise on this side of the garden. But if you want to follow me along this way, we'll go on and discuss a wee bit more.
Yeah, I would love to see more.
So as we're going through Lilywood here, you'll see a lot of tropical plants between our Dicksonia antarctica, our lovely tree ferns. Lilywood gets its name from our Cardiocranium giganteum, which are just here on the right.
Yep.
So we have 5 different locations within Lilywood that recently we've replanted out with them to reintroduce them back into the garden, because we actually have lots of correspondence from Lady Edith in her diaries where she talks very highly about the lilies down here and the very fragrant smells that they produce, that she was able to smell them from up in the house itself.
Yeah, I guess if the wind were carrying them. And with the Cardiocranium, do you plant those every year or every other year to get like staggered flowering?
So what we've actually done is, since we only reintroduced them in the last year, so we're actually conducting planting schemes or planting every year for about the first 5 years.
Okay.
To reintroduce them into different parts of the garden. Another interesting plant we actually have is our banana trees to our front, as well as our very large kiwi vine, which actually does produce kiwis, which I have had one before.
Was it delicious?
It was very bitter. Very, very bitter.
Oh wow, so what are we looking at here in the garden?
So we are in the sun garden. The sun garden is one of the only parts of the gardens where we actually believe that Lady Edith actually got a bit of help with her design aesthetics for the parterres. We actually have some letters of where she was actually in a correspondence with Gertrude Jingle and discussions over the design and the general outlay and the interpretation of the garden itself.
And then this area, the borders we're looking at, that discussion was later, after 22 or before?
So this was 1922. So even another fun fact is that all the azaleas, which are just coming into flower, and our lovely yellows with a slight tinge of orange in them, are actually from the original plantings from over 100 years ago. Some of them are starting to show their age, but they're still going. The majority of them are still going strong and healthy.
Oh wow! So this could be a collaboration with Gertrude Jekyll, probably one of the most famous female designers of the last 200 years. That's really incredible.
Very much so. Very much so.
Wow.
The sun garden itself just comes into life from about May into June, and it's just an explosion of colour, textures, as you can just see around us here now, between leaf definition and shape, and even just smells.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and lots of fragrances with the osmanthus there. Okay, well, let's carry on this way because I'd like to see some more.
Sure. So as we're stepping down into the shamrock garden here, which gets its name from our Chilean yew hedge, which is in the shape of a shamrock, which goes along the outside of the garden itself. And you'll also see our lovely Irish harp in the distance and our lovely red-handed ulster as well.
I mean, this space is very, very different to that garden there. I mean, is this as this would have originally been?
Yes, the planting scheme is. The only thing that's actually changed is what we're standing on.
Okay.
So whenever this garden was actually first constructed, this was actually had a Scrabo sandstone flagging over the top of it, the surface itself, so it wasn't pink pebbles. So pink pebbles was a later addition that was added before the trust time to simplify the maintenance of this area. So as we're walking through here, you'll actually start to see some of our topiary. So on our right here, we actually have a hare that has an arrow stuck in his rump.
Yes.
And the topiary itself actually tells a story from Celtic myth.
Okay.
So it does.
And you've got crowns here, I see.
We do some crowns, and we're actually working our way through to actually try and reintroduce a lot of the topiary back to bring the original aesthetic back to the garden itself.
Well, that's quite exciting. So how many of these would there have been?
So originally there was 24, so we have 12. So we're kind of working on a program of adding in a couple more every year to bring back that original story and the heritage back to Lady Edith. And
I think she sounds like a very creative person who really had a sense of humour as well as a love of plants. And I really like that.
Oh, very much so. Very, very much so. So as we're going through Lilywood here, I was talking to you about some of the rare rhododendron types that are entirely endemic to this site that Lady Edith generated herself. And to our front here is a lovely one, and this is Rhododendron tomboyus.
So this would have been a cross, or it would have been a seedling that she raised?
It was a cross, so rhododendrons themselves are very promiscuous, so they hybridize very easily. So like at the top end of the site we have the first Rhododendron magnificum that was brought into the UK from China itself. It was brought through as seed stock. So
actually, it's very beautiful when it opens, that kind
very
of
much.
peach to yellow.
Yes.
I mean, it's quite funny because I've already said it at another garden, rhododendrons are not my favourite thing. I love herbaceous perennials. But I could live with this one. It's very pale, primrosy, has that little bit of apricot, has a good form in the leaf. It's a good plant, I think.
Very much so, beautiful.
Now, is there anything else that you think I should see?
I have one more surprise for you.
Okay.
And we're going to have to double back on ourselves.
Okay, let's go. Well, it really strikes me walking back through here. These sculptures are all quite fantastical. You've got like the dodos, you've got monkeys. She must have been quite a revolutionary woman for that period of time. She was
very eccentric for her era. For like even back in the early 1900s, it was unheard of for ladies of her stature to even be tattooed. Tattooed, yes.
Okay, she was tattooed.
She was. So from what I'm told, she had 4 tattoos, but one of her most famous ones is she actually had a snake on her leg that started at her ankle and just worked its way up to her thigh.
Wow.
And even through the sculpture and design aesthetics in the garden. So as you look in the distance here, you can see the arc. The arc represents the Arc Society, which was her fantasy art club.
Okay.
And all the sculptures in the dodo terrace here, which are referenced from our lovely pillar caps here, done with dodos. Our statues representing different individuals within our art club from different members of the autocracy back in the day.
Wow.
If you want to head up there, we're going to have a look at
and then we need to see this surprise. Okay, so what's the surprise?
The surprise I have for you is just in front of us here. This cordyline was one of the first ones that actually came into the United Kingdom.
Oh, wow.
And it's over 100 years old.
It has got a very, very impressive stature and trunk. That is quite impressive, I must say.
It's a lovely specimen. The buttressing on the base of it is just, it's sublime.
And I think it's testament to the unique climate all through here that is the first place, because you gardeners today I think would assume that maybe the first place would have been the southwest coast, like Cornwall or somewhere in Kent, but actually to be here in Northern Ireland where we're kind of almost opposite Scotland and that be the first place is extraordinary. And it is a very, very large specimen.
Very much so. It's one of a couple we have on site that are roughly around the same age and same size, and we all think they came through the same batch would they as well.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to let you get back to the gardening and I'm going to go and have a closer look, but thank you so much. It's been
Thank you for your
an
time.
absolute pleasure. Thank you. Now, this is quite unusual fuchsia. You see the enormous trunk behind me, which means it's quite an old one. It's an introduction from New Zealand. It's probably been here about 100 years. It's exquisite. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. That is not the fuchsia flower of your dreams for a garden. It's quite dull unless you're a real plantsman. But if I let go of this branch, you'll see it has something very unique about it. So this is from New Zealand. And the reason why it's special is because the Maori use this coloured pollen to add their face paint to make those tribal markings or whatever, and apparently I could do the same. So let's give it a little go, see if anything happens. Hoping now I've got like a dash of purple, looking a little bit like, I don't know, an 80s rock chick, who knows. But I thought you'd like that really quite unusual fuchsia. Might not be everyone's gardening taste, but it's got some use. Well, after a busy morning exploring, there's nothing nicer than coming back and finding a quiet corner with a little bit of music and really indulge myself in a delicious afternoon tea. We're at one of the most northerly parts of the United Kingdom. This dramatic landscape is really one that's forged by the weather.